I think there's going to be sort of an inflection point where technology goes more towards design and design goes more toward technology, and they'll meet somewhere in the middle. Because I want to understand the problem, and then I want to make an experience out of the solution. Those are the skills that people should have. How to train for that is really with soft skill training and understanding people, and then having that creativity to make an experience out of whatever it is these things can do for other people.
I'm here with Jente Rosseel. Jente, welcome.
Thank you, Elvis. Happy to be here.
Jente, you're based in Kenya, Nairobi.
Indeed, we're currently in winter, so I know everyone in Europe is probably wearing shorts right now, but us, we have to do it with sweaters.
You're cold, yeah. So your company, you're a software developer.
Yeah, software architect.
An architect. What does that mean?
An architect, I do more of solutioning, so I have quite a bit of a background in software development myself. Did it for over 10 years. Still code today, but more on some advanced things like how systems should talk and protocols and those type of things. Generally, my job is really to sit with clients, try to understand their problems, and then find out, just like the architect of a house, which technology solution will be a good fit for whatever you're looking for. So that's sort of what I focus on, compare it to an architect of a house, but then we do it with technology.
Okay. And you have or had two companies that were the same but different. So there was Elewa and Italenta. And I remember we had our trip to Berlin together, and I wrote them both down as companies that we have coming. And our mutual friend, Yussi, from Fuzu, told me, hey, that's actually the same company. So
Yeah.
what's going on? Who are you? What is your company?
Yeah, maybe we're already jumping like two steps ahead, and I should take a step back and explain how I ended up in this place in the first place. But I came to Kenya.
How are you? You don't look very Kenyan, so
yeah, yeah, of course. But I came to Kenya about, is it 12, 13 years ago, initially for an internship. I did 2 degrees, but it's now really going far back. But it was my first degree in applied computer science. And I had to do an internship. So I had 2 choices. One of the big, how do you call that? The big accounting firms offered me an internship in Estonia, everything paid. Yeah, would have been a nice experience. And then I had a small, actually medium to large size Belgium NGO that offered me an adventure to Kenya to go and work for the Ministry of Education there on one of their projects. And to basically, this was a very interesting assignment, but my assignment was basically to build a school management information system at the level of the ministry to track all of the school's inventory and those type of things. I did not complete it, but I do think even for it being my first internship, I did get far. And most importantly, I ended up in Kenya for the first time. So I decided to go for the adventure. Took a plane, had to pay for everything myself. So that was also a bit of the opposite, but I thought I'm going to be working in this corporate sector for forever. So why not have a bit of an adventure before I start my career? And that was about 2012. I went to Kenya for the first time again, stayed here for 4 months, went back, worked a year in the corporate sector, and didn't really do much with that Kenyan experience, but I did build a bit of a network here. And so after about a year into my corporate job, working for one of the big banks in Belgium, I'm Belgian originally, maybe I also haven't mentioned that. I decided, I was starting to reach sort of the limits of my knowledge. So I wanted to go back to school and do my master's. So I first did a professional bachelor, then I wanted to go and switch to a master's. And secondly, I also wanted something a bit more adventurous than just working in this very large structure. So I quit my job. I went to the University of Brussels to do a bridging year first, and then a 2 years master in engineering computer science. And at the same time, my network in Kenya said, we have this problem in Kenya, which is the training of teachers. Teachers are giving a lot of responsibility here in Kenya, but they're basically being trained as, if I'm a mathematics teacher in Kenya, I will be taught mathematics, but there's a big gap in training how to teach. That has improved in recent years, but 10 years ago, that was still a huge problem.
Like pedagogy.
pedagogy was missing. So you would be an expert in content, but then how do I transfer that content to students of 12 to 13 to 14 years old? That itself is also a skill that is probably even more important than knowing tertiary mathematics. And so we decided to narrow down on that problem, and we created Elewa in that year, and that was 2014. So 2 years, about 2.5 years after my first Kenyan internship. The idea was simple. I would develop the whole technology application, and then he would go into the market, sell it to schools, and we would start a social enterprise. We were also very deliberate about starting a social enterprise because we saw by then the NGO that I was working for had temporarily halted their operations, and a lot of the investment that was being done in the country, the moment that funding dries up, you see all of those projects collapse. So what we basically had as an idea, let's start a social enterprise so that we have an incentive also for people to keep investing in this product, and eventually it can be localized and fully left to the Kenyan markets. So we started that in 2014. We built this whole system where basically it was a huge project. I also made my master thesis out of it. Ended up scoring the highest master thesis of computer science that year. But it was about trying to understand what is the big challenge in education, and then you narrow down into this pedagogy, which I already mentioned. How can we address this challenge in a sustainable way? Also knowing that digital literacy, which again has improved a lot now, but back at the time was not yet very there in schools, especially working with teachers in rural schools across a country as wide as Kenya, almost the size of France. So it's bigger than France, I think, even. So it's quite a heavy challenge to create a system that could work for all of these stakeholders. So we ended up with an approach where we had a technology stack used to basically every lesson, we developed lesson plans for it so that on a practical way, teachers would know these are ideas on how I can teach, for example, forces in mathematics. If you go to a Kenyan classroom, I know we're getting into random stuff here, but I like random stuff, and I think you do too. So let's just keep going.
Yeah. Okay.
If you go into a traditional Kenyan classroom back in the day, again, things have changed with the new curriculum and stuff. You would find that just to set the scene, you've just eaten lunch, so your stomach is full. You're under this, what we in Swahili say, mabati roof. So it's like this golf plate type of roof. The sun is hitting very hard, and you're in a classroom of 80 students. So your attention span,
80,
having
80.
eaten 80, being under the sun, and then is already a tough spot to start with. But then you have a teacher in front of the class that takes a notebook and just says in a very monotonic voice, imagine a ball rolling down a hill. Imagine you are pushing a cart. That is what we call forces, and forces are written in Newton, and here is a graph of a vector that shows how the forces work. As if you put yourself in the mindset of that student, you are completely lost at that point. It's first of all, it's not interesting content to follow, which is becoming more and more of a problem as we get into AI and especially what is it called? The time span economy, the attention economy, I think they call it. So it's already not very engaging content. The circumstances with it's just after lunch, you're already not paying much attention. So that pedagogy, there was a big room for improvement we saw there. And so what we developed was basically lesson plans where we would say to the teacher, hey, why don't we try something else? You have this room of 40 to 80 students, let them all stand up and let them do a push-up. You're already activating their muscles. You're starting to get the blood flowing so that people can start having attention. At the same time, you have this blackboard behind you. Take this is an English word I don't know. In Krijt we say in the judge, but
chalk.
A chalk.
Piece of chalk. Yeah.
And then chalkboard, of course, and then put it on the board. Draw a stick dude, put an arrow through their head, and now you're introducing the students to forces so they can experience this force themselves. And then because of the representation of the stick dude with the arrow, they can also make this mental connection to these vectors we're drawing. They're actually a real thing. And so that's sort of some of the key concepts we want to teach when we introduce forces. Instead of jumping straight into the technical part, talking about vectors, talking about mathematics, let's have people experience that. So that's a very typical, simple pedagogical approach to introduce people to forces. And then we did that for all of the subjects in the first secondary year. All of the lessons, we created lesson plans, all developed by Kenyan teachers, actually. How we did that is also a funny story, but we basically focused on pedagogy.
The first secondary year, what is that? What age is that in Kenya?
That's 14 or 15.
Okay.
So back in the day, again, now it's the same as in Europe, where you have 6-6 in the new curriculum. Back then it used to be 8-4. And so we were focusing on the first year. So that's the 9th year if you start from 0. And then the second year we also got pretty far, but we didn't manage to complete that. So we had all of these guides, and we didn't use technology at this point because we also wanted to make it accessible to teachers across the whole country, which means you have to optimize for cost. And what we really want to bring across is this message of what are ideas in which I can change up my lessons. That doesn't necessarily need to come on a laptop. If you get it printed on simple A4s, it's endlessly cheaper, and it disseminates even faster because they don't have to log in and lose their password and all of that. So that was step 1. Step 2, we looked at, okay, if you want to address this problem holistically, teachers need to know how their students are understanding this content, right? And so you need assessment. Now, if you have 40 to 80 students on average in a classroom, asking a teacher to assess this frequently, also knowing that teachers in Kenya are extremely overworked. They have other responsibilities, such as they spend very long hours in schools here. So there's no room for these assessments. So what we decided was to develop simple technology where you would write down your student number, you would write down your answers. So if on the blackboard I have a question and I have answer 2, 1, 2, 3, and I think it's 2, I'm going to put 2. So very simple. Then we would push that through a scanner and we would mark those 80 students in less than a minute. So very simple OCR, A5 papers. Again, not coming with this idea of we need to give all of these students tablets. Instead, more focusing on how do we solve this problem in a cheap way that is scalable across the whole education system, but that still gives enough insights to really help teachers do their job, because teachers do not have all the support they need to do their job. So that technology would then, very simple, it would just be on a scanner, but then we would have one tablet where the teacher can now review all of these questions, basically also see who answered what, because what we deliberately did was also develop some of these assessments to be vague, where there is no correct yes or no answer. Because what you really want to teach in a 21st century context is critical thinking, debate, communication. Those are skills that AI will
Let me write those down.
Find it harder to replace. But those are skills that if you look at education systems, even in Europe, they don't really train on, they don't really have that as the main focus. So what we basically were able to do is, okay, Timmy said this, Sadie said that. Timmy, why did you say this? And then Timmy would need to talk in front of the classroom and explain why he gave a certain answer. And then Sadie maybe gave another answer. She then has to go into debate with Timmy, and they have to debate it out. Or you would group them into smaller groups of which the system would also suggest of these 4 have different opinions, put them together. These 5 have different opinions, put them together. And then you always go into bigger groups until the whole classroom has consensus. That's how you really bring 21st century pedagogy into more traditional classrooms, which we also still have in Europe. It's not a problem just here. So that was sort of our second thing. So we had the pedagogical guides, we had the assessments. Up to this point, we did have everything in those assessments with knowledge trees and AI and all of that stuff, but that's less important. What's important is how do you make the technology accessible in Swahili we say kwa ground, on the ground, that teachers can understand. And so we piloted that thing. It was built by 2016. When we went to the field, we realized it's still very hard for teachers to use a tablet. Because again, you have to log in, you have to remember your password. If you don't use devices on a day-to-day basis, these things are hard to use, so they don't get used. So then the key question we asked is, how do we drive adoption? We took a step back, and we realized, okay, instead of people having to talk to a tablet, why don't we let them talk to people? And so we had 5 pilot schools. In each of the schools, we employed someone, and they became what we called an Elewa teaching assistant. The name Elewa also comes from there. It's I'll talk about that later. Those are confusing issues. But they would basically have the tablet, and teachers would be able to talk to a person, and the person would talk to the tablet and translate those findings through to the teacher. And that drove adoption, exploded in all the schools we worked with. And we also saw all the schools we worked with transform. So a very impactful project. Still added a second layer of coaches. So every teacher would have a coach that would, in every 2 weeks, talk to them about, I don't know if you know grow model coaching. Goal,
No.
what are you trying to achieve? Reality, why is it not working? My students are lazy. They don't want to pay attention. Okay, can we dive a bit deeper into that? Your students are lazy, your students are not performing. What does that mean? And then you actually get to that point. They're not paying attention. Okay, the problem, I can't do anything about your students being lazy. I can't do anything about your students being dumb. Sometimes they outright said, but I can do something about this attention thing. How are we going to increase this attention? Then you get into options, and this is where you can really drive change. Can we together brainstorm about what we can do about this problem? What are the options we have? And of course, we have the pedagogical guides. We have these assessments we can do, which are also assessments for learning, formative assessments. But maybe the teacher comes up with their own suggestions. And then you get, so that's the options, the O of grow. Then you get to the W, the will. I'm coming back in 2 weeks. What will you have done? And the first time you come back in 2 weeks, they haven't done anything. Because
they're wondering if you will come back.
I was busy, and exams are coming. Okay, let's do the thing again. You were busy. That's the reality. What can we do about that? So you go deeper, 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 and every 2 weeks you have a milestone, and eventually you start seeing change. It's a technique that comes from management consulting. It's actually used a lot in companies for change management. But we also applied that to teachers, and we saw schools transform into, in a few months. You would come back 3 months after, and you would find that the principal starts telling you things like, my students just look more alive than I've ever seen them before. When you then do a quantitative analysis, you find that the school is scoring maybe 3 out of 12 on average, and suddenly they're scoring 7 out of 12. It's not perfect. I mean, you're still
but
5
that's
points
a huge
down.
leap.
But if you look at in a very short amount of time, the leap you can have, you're really seeing the impact of such a program. And so we did that between 2015 to 2020. Also got all of the recognition. We got into Google for Startups, for example. We got into a Belgian incubator as well. We really did the startup right. But of course, when you do the startup right, you also have these scaling issues. And what we couldn't figure out, we had an amazing product, but we didn't have a market. And so in 2020, we realized, okay, what our premise of social enterprise to start changing things in schools across the nation might be fundamentally flawed, because schools don't have the budget to pay for this thing. Making the case of maybe a B2G case, business to government case, could be an option, but that was not really a process we were very interested in, because then you get into very long sales cycles. We didn't have any experience with that. I was fresh from university, so zero work experience in that sense. We eventually had to just shut down the project because of financial considerations. And so our name, Elewa, which is how I went up in this whole rant of what we used to do in basic education, comes from it's Swahili for the word to understand. And it comes from this premise that I talked about earlier. If you have an education system that is focused on making people remember, 20th century, we need factory workers, we need to be able to move that education system to something that goes up higher in, I don't know if you know Bloom's taxonomy, but maybe I'm introducing too many concepts. It goes higher into the cognitive sort of challenge. Once you remember,
Jente, you're making me look bad. I don't know any of these.
Once you understand,
so help me.
Can apply. Yeah, so basically, once you remember, you can understand. Once you understand, you can apply. Once you can apply, you can analyze. Then you can, so basically take a problem and break it down. Then you can synthesize, which is have a lot of small things and build them back up. eventually you can create. So when we talk about people being, you're a creative guy, in Belgium, we have this saying that if someone can draw very nicely on a piece of paper, we call them creative. To me, creativity is innovation. And creativity is something you can train people on. If you know two domains so well that you can find ways in which they can strengthen themselves, you can innovate and you're creative. And so creation is the highest order in that sense of knowledge. And so the name Elewa comes from that first step from remembering to understanding on the way to creation and innovation. So that's sort of where our background lies, rooted in educational theory, in this case, Blue's taxonomy. Now I'm going to pause because I think I talked too much and maybe I need to clarify some things.
No, no, that was great. So you've been around for a while, and I think I heard you make a little jab at giving every kid a laptop, giving every kid a tablet.
Mm. Just
Um,
you noticed that,
yeah,
yeah.
talk to me about that. So this was at the
Mm,
same time. So there's the
mm,
background for this is we had, was it the 2016,
mm,
no,
mm,
2017 elections? Every kid is going
mm,
to get a laptop and a bag. That
mm,
was
mm,
Uhuru Ruto. When they
mm,
put the two names, Uhuru
mm,
Kenyatta and William
mm,
Ruto, the
mm,
president and vice president, were running together.
mm,
That was their campaign. And we also, a bit before that, had the whole MIT OLPC, one laptop per child. Talk
mm.
to me about that. How is that? That was in the same time as you
Yeah,
were
that was around the
working
same
on
time.
this. So
Mm,
speak freely about that. How do you feel about that? What was some overlap? What were some differences
mm.
in your
I'm not
approach?
necessarily giving a jab to that program. I think the idea behind it is good, of course. The problem lies always in the devil is always in the details. So execution. If we're going to procure, yeah, basically millions of laptops for everyone in schools, but then that is not strengthened with a very strong teacher training program behind it. What you end up on the ground when you go to these schools is that you find all of these laptops are locked somewhere in a cabinet with the teacher actually gatekeeping them being the ICT teacher. Because when the kids use these computers, they ask the ICT teacher a question and the ICT teacher doesn't necessarily know the answer. So that is actually the reality of what is happening on the ground with these things. Um, so you have huge capex investment, and then the question is, where is the result that we're trying to achieve with this?
So I heard that story many times
Mm,
from several
mm,
different sources of the
mm,
laptops being locked up.
mm.
Now, you're giving me a different reason. So the reasons given, so your reasoning for why they locked them up is because the
Mm.
teachers didn't want to look
Well,
unfavorable, like didn't
that's
want to look stupid in
it's
front of the
more
kids.
the what I'm trying to say is the procurement is done,
Yeah.
but there is no training following with how do I integrate ICT in education. And so the anecdote of the ICT teacher is one, but the bigger problem is um, what do teachers do with these laptops? You've given me 50 laptops. I
Yeah.
mean, you didn't give me any training on how I should change my lessons with it. You
Yeah.
just told me do lessons with this laptop. I'm not maybe an ICT user that frequently. And now I have 50 people with a laptop that need to learn something. How do I go about teaching them? And it's the same problem as we were focusing on back in the day. Yeah? How do we strengthen this pedagogical knowledge? If you're throwing ICT in the loop, you're going even a step further. You're going technical pedagogical knowledge. How do I find the right technology for the right pedagogy? So how do I find, we call that the TPAC, technical pedagogical content knowledge. Given a piece of content or a subject matter I want to transfer to you, what pedagogical approach is best? That is pedagogical content knowledge. What technology can I use within that pedagogical context is technological pedagogical content, TPAC. So it's a skill that you need to develop on how do I select the right technology and the right pedagogical approach with that technology to teach a certain subject. So just having the technology does not give you the pedagogical approach, does not give you even the selection of which content am I going to teach over this medium.
What
So you
happened?
need to have all
Sorry,
three of them.
what happened to that approach of, I forget the gentleman's name, you might know, an Indian approach of computer in the wall. this idea of, you may have heard of, let me just, I don't have
I'm
a,
gonna write that down.
see, we're bootstrapping here, so I'm doing this in
Yeah.
real time myself. Computer. So so this was, yeah, Mitra. Sungata Mitra. He had this idea
Mhm.
of he had these fancy office buildings in India, and then right next to them there was a slum, and they were separated by a wall. And what he would do is he would put a computer in the wall, and he would have the kids in the slum, they could just walk up to it and play with it. They could just try to figure it out.
Mhm. Mhm.
And his idea was that they've actually taught themselves all kinds of things the way my
Mhm.
kids teach themselves before they could read. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. They knew which buttons
Mhm.
to press without
Yeah.
reading the words, trial
Mhm.
and error, and then the little brains just remember, oh yeah, I got to press this one, got to press that one in order to get back to my game. And so he was very bullish on this concept of just giving them the devices, kind of the opposite of what you're saying, like just give them the
Mhm.
devices. This was back in 2010 or so.
Mhm.
This is old. Like, so
Mhm.
I'm not sure where that went. I haven't heard about it in a while, but just this, what you're saying is this philosophy isn't working. You need
I'm
to
not. No,
actually,
no. I'm not against that. And I think again, it's the school context. If you give them these devices in a school context that is traditionally a rigid type of context, where are you going to give them the moments to play with it and just figure stuff out? Will the school accept them just all downloading some shooter game or something and then figuring out how to? That's how I learned to code.
yeah,
Call of Duty 2, hacking servers is basically my first experience I had with doing things in engineering. And so you can't do something like that in a school context, at least not in the context we're in here. So I'm not necessarily against that idea of computer in the wall. If you look at it more with the modern lens of 2025, it's I think how everyone is figuring out AI. We just have this box we're playing with, we're seeing
yeah,
what comes out, and then
yeah.
we're realizing, okay, if I do this, it's a bit better. I'm not necessarily against that as a pedagogical approach. But in the context in which this laptop per child program, which we're still talking about, was deployed, it wasn't deployed like this, at least not in the schools I visited. It could be that it was done like that in other schools.
I actually don't know how it was deployed. All I know is
Mhm.
that some people who were involved in it also said the same thing you
Mhm.
just said, that these things were just locked up for fear of, being lost or different reasons.
Mhm.
Teachers just wouldn't give them out,
Mhm.
and it just didn't, um, yeah, I'm speaking out of school here because I
Mhm.
should have just read up on it before, but I didn't know we were going down this track, which is great.
I
So
that
I,
is what it's about.
so yeah, I don't actually know. It might have been successful, but from what I heard, it had its difficulties as anything
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
development. It's trial and error, and it's hit and miss. So Elewa, you guys did that. You started quite early then, 2015.
2015, while I was still in university. I graduated in 2017. So also my master thesis was really about human-centered design and design science. How can we design something that really integrates well within the current educational system that we have in Kenya? And then you come up with these approaches such as having a human interface to a technology. But then also I did some early work on AI in education, which I still do a bit on today. And yeah, ended up scoring the highest master thesis that year.
You
But it was
mentioned, yeah.
80 to 90% pedagogy, and I did my master's in computer science, but I'm still proud of that work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you did that master's at where in Belgium?
University of Brussels, but I was traveling already in between Kenya.
Yeah, how do you do that? How do you do a master's from 2015 to 2017 and already founded was it an NGO back then, or was it, what was
No, it was
Alewa?
all social enterprise. So Elewa is
Us-
still the same legal entity as it is today. We do very different things, which um, I sort of talked about when I said we reached 2020 and we couldn't really make it beyond that. Um, but yeah, there's also a funny story behind that one because when I was a student, I had a lot of time and I had no money. When I was at university, I had, sorry, when I was working, I had no time and some actually good money in engineering, but I didn't have time anymore. And so I thought, I'm going back to school, I'm becoming a student entrepreneur. Now I will have time and money. I ended up with none of the two, but that was sort of the idea of starting a company within my university years. Now, I was lucky in my master's that a lot of the practical stuff that you see in a master's of computer science, I had already seen in my bachelor, because I did a professional bachelor. In Belgium, we have a system, I think it's a bit similar to Germany, but you can have the hogescholen, the high schools. High schools is not a good translation, but the colleges, where you teach for the market. So you teach a practical skill. I did one of those first, and then you have the university where they more teach you academic fundamentals. So because I had the practical skills already from my first degree, my 2 master years were actually quite simple, because that's when in university you start seeing the practical stuff. So I had a lot of time on my hands. I was young. I'm still young, but I wanted to do something. And so I had the energy, and still have the energy today also. Would I recommend it is a different question. That's
So that's Elewa, and you've changed it in 2020. But what's iTalenta?
So iTalenta is what was added to Elewa back in 2020, and we realized what we're good at. We're good at technology. We also had won the UNESCO ICT and Education Prize for Kenya in 2019, made it to the global top 10 finalists. So we knew our technology was solid, and we could find.
Who's we? Now you're speaking plural.
I'm talking as a company.
Oh, okay. But you're still the founder, CEO.
Yeah,
you're the head of.
We initially started with 2, and then in 2020 I took over the company, and so I was solo founder from 2020. We were 2 before 2020, and so, but still, if you talk from the company, we have a group. It's not just me, even though we did had a good cut in 2019, because we went from 17 to 3. So the 2020 ones I'm talking about, that was the 3 of us. And so we knew we were good in technology. We're good in education, so in teaching people. Let us combine these things. And when I took over the company, we were in a bit of a rough financial position in 2020, because again, we were trying for 5 years. We had raised some money, but you know that also never lasts forever. You eventually need to start making money. And so I was with a bit of a financial hole, having inherited this company and still having some people on payroll. So we started thinking about how do we solve this issue. And I was in the hole for about $25,000. So I had a friend of mine who was in Belgium and wanted to start a startup, but was looking for a technical co-founder. Not really.
Aren't we all?
Maybe aren't we all? But for that, I have a solution which I'll talk about in a bit.
Yeah, please.
So he was looking for a technical co-founder, and so they had this MVP. It was working, but it was not built on solid technical foundation. They needed someone for the long term. So I said, I'll build this MVP for 25,000 euros, which was exactly the hole I was in. We went on the market with that. I actually executed it at the same time. I was still in Kenya. I hired 2 interns to work with me on that project. And so this education drive, which has always been my heart, I actually forgot, I didn't introduce myself on the podcast properly, because I always say I'm a computer scientist by trade and a teacher at heart. So this heart for education, I also come from a family of teachers, but anyway, this heart of education still was there. We started getting people with no job in IT, no job experience, brought them in, and then worked them on jobs in Europe, specifically than this one job we had, which was one of the startup MVPs we built in real estate. Eventually, that was the big turnaround of our luck, because the project was a hit and became one of the fastest startup exits of Belgium. And suddenly we're there with a team of 10 developers working for this client. Of course, now you can't build a business out of one client, but it was a nice sort of rank onto then getting other clients and starting to do the same thing and building out a business, basically. And so what the business was, still is today, we bring in software developers on an apprenticeship program. Typically, they have a master's in or a bachelor in IT. Sometimes they also done these technical boot camps that you have, the 3 to 6 months boot camps, but it's not a requirement. The first person I started with, which almost got to architect level and then eventually went to consult for herself. So she's no longer but she did get to do this architecture stuff already. Had a background in communication, for example. So bachelor communication, self-taught how to code. One of the first people I worked with. But typically, you find that they do have a bachelor in IT or a master's in IT, and they need a first job. So we bring those in. Very tough selection. Typically, when we try to do 5 per quarter, also based on demand, but typically we do 5 per quarter. When we recruit for these 5, we have over 500 applicants trying to get that job. So you select the top 1% just by sheer numbers of people trying to find a job in this market in IT. And so we called it the Italanta apprenticeship program, high potential apprenticeship program. Talanta is Swahili for talent, and then the I was the days of iPod and iPhone. So it was.
Oh,
it's
is
not,
it? Talanta is Swahili for talent.
Yes, that's where the name
See,
comes from.
my ignorance, I thought it sounded Italian to me somehow. It sounded like something from Italy. I
Talanta.
couldn't, yeah. Well, maybe because it started with, you corrected me, you said it's Italanta. I used to call it Italanta. So it's just Italy, and then with the A at the end, I just thought it was Italian, maybe because it sounds like Italy. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Before the story I did on the name Elewa, we also did a lot of brainstorming. Finding a name is not hard. It's not easy.
You
And
did
I
a lot
also
of
don't know
mushrooms,
Swahili.
like the
No, I
guys
don't do
in
such
Silicon
things.
Valley. You did the mushroom trip to the desert
That's not me.
for
But what I
for.
was saying is I was just giving a lot of IDs, and eventually we came out of E. It needs to be E something. But an E from internet, you know, the E they use. And so I
Yeah.
said Elewa, because again, it just came up when we were going through these things. Ilimu from e-teacher and stuff already existed, so Elewa was my idea. But then it turns out Lewa in Swahili is drunk, and Elewa means to understand. So it's something that if you have your European accent and you're looking at the Swahili, you start pronouncing these things in an English fashion, but you can end up having them mean e-drunk, digital drunk, instead of actually understand as the name is supposed to be. Just to,
Right. Right. Yeah, it's not a bad thing. Digital drunk. We'll get there. We'll get to the whole AI, yeah, AGI question. Are we in a simulation? Is this are we brains in a vat? But we'll get there. So
Okay, great.
so how come it was two different? So the one was the project in Belgium, and the other one was a project in Kenya. So
No,
Elewa was the
no.
one where
So
you got yourself out of the 25,000 with
that
your
was actually Italanta, but it was the
that was
same company,
Italanda. Got it.
same legal
Yeah.
entity, but we
Yeah.
called the program Italanta. Now, Elewa was still doing education stuff back then,
Yeah.
so we also looked at, okay, how do we scale up? How do we scale up education? Because by that time we were doing some e-learning for universities because we found that's where we can get paid, but my heart was never in it. So when I took over the company, we started looking at, okay, how do we build education for the masses? That's always been my sort of passion.
Yeah.
And out of that came a program that we then later spun out into a separate company, where we basically developed a platform for teaching over WhatsApp. And so Elewa back then was still running under our education programs. We had that one. We also had some pro bono programs that we still do to date, where we have our old education model, but then instead of trying to do it commercially, we just do it pro bono, 1 or 2 projects a year like that. And so we still had our education identity back then. And Italanta, we really tried to push as our technology identity. So we had the education program under there, but it was technology education. We did some other stuff under there in education, such as we had a program where we run a boot camp, IT boot camp in the refugee camps. So we still had some, all of these things were jumbled up, and it was a problem we struggled with for quite a few years after that, where you have Elewa and Italanta. Are they different things? Are they the same thing? But back then we were saying our technology arm is Italanta, our education arm is Elewa. Today we have simplified all of that, and there is just one company, which is Elewa, and Elewa does one core business, which is that what first people called Italanta, which is we deliver projects to mostly startups and SMEs in Europe, but we also do South Africa, UK, and those markets. And we do that from Kenya. So we develop for the European market with Kenyan talent, and at the same time we develop that Kenyan talent into from a junior to a senior engineer, because you find that on senior level you still have to fight to get enough profiles, whereas on junior level no one gets an opportunity to do a job. And so we want to be that bridge, but then also make sure that our seniors go far beyond anything else in this market, by giving them very challenging and fun projects.
So now you're
And so there's only Elewa.
Elewa. Italenta is gone. We don't talk about it anymore.
It's still the name of our program, our early
the
stage program.
Right.
But for everyone else, we just have Elewa.
Elewa is the website and the public face of the company. All right.
Yeah. Took us about 5 years to get out of that identity crisis.
You were at refugee camps? Were you in Dadaab?
Kakuma.
Kakuma.
We did a program together with Windel. We did who does the public, so with the secondary schools there. And Microsoft was also a sponsor of that program. And so what we did there was we basically did a traditional bootcamp. We took our experienced engineers. So when someone comes into our program, we call them a developer. Then you have a level 1 developer, a level 2 developer. And then when they graduate, which typically happens within, record is 11 months. So it's also very merit driven, but average is about 2 years. Then we call them engineers. And so that's our finished product. And that's so we would send our engineers to the refugee camp with a classroom of, I think, 25 people, and also our own curriculum, because I used to run code schools in Belgium. So we sort of worked with the same people, ported the curriculum to Kenya, and then we ran that into the refugee camp with the idea of, can we get people trained there on IT, and then also bring them and get them global jobs in Europe through our company, our agency, basically. Now, the program was not very successful in hindsight, because people come from very far. You have a basic education in secondary education, which is great, but you don't necessarily have a bachelor, for example, in IT, or a master's in IT. And making that bridge from secondary school to market is a very big leap. Our program lasted 6 months, and no one that came out of it, unfortunately, was ready for market. So what I started focusing on instead was, how can I create programs that form a linkage between these guys coming out of school, often bachelors and masters, and the job market. So my focus really shifted up in the chain, rather than doing these schools and these bootcamps myself. The other challenge, and this is maybe where I have a bit of a controversial opinion, but I know you like those, Elvis, is the question about what we were doing in those refugee camps with those programs in the first place. Because if you live in Nairobi like I do, and I've been living here 8 years permanently, you find that you have an Uber driver that the moment I open my app, I have 50 people that want to drive me somewhere. I only need one. And you find that of those 50, maybe 30 have a bachelor degree or have a master's degree. I might be exaggerating. I don't know the exact number.
I mean, I always ask them, and it's crazy what they used to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, teacher, health professionals, just people driving Uber and Bolt is just crazy in terms of the labor market. So yeah, you're absolutely right. You're not exaggerating. From my own experience, it's just people driving cars in Kenya is just an example, is just emblematic of the dire straits of the labor market. Please continue.
And so my position has shifted from, why would I invest a lot more into trying to get someone from 0 to 1 if I have someone who's maybe already at a 5 and I just need to get them to 10. And so I started focusing more on people with a background in that sense.
So you're still assuming, though, that the problem is that, when you're saying from 0 to 1, it's in terms of their skills, right? And if you're saying them from 5 to 10,
but yeah, indeed, in terms of skills.
Yeah. What if I were to say, well, the skills are there, it's just the bridge to the global clients. The money isn't in the local economy. The money is in the global economy. how do you connect people to global clients in order to then learn on the job? I don't know. I mean, teaching
No,
people stuff, learning stuff.
I agree
Yeah.
to some regard, but please continue. I don't think.
Yeah, no, no. I mean,
Mhm.
if you're saying the skills were lacking, you wanted to take people who are already skilled in order to just kind of take them the last mile, right? Was that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you look at it on the numbers of engineers that we've had, and I've gone quite through tens of engineers that have joined our program, launched their career with us. You do find that on average, and I'm taking on average again, you have these outliers that have, for example, a bachelor in communication and still make it to be one of the best that ever gone to the program. But on average, you find people that already have a bit of a background in uh, IT.
Hmm.
It's much easier to train them for the job market. So to make that step from a graduate to employable, and in my sense
Right.
as a company, billable, because
Yeah.
employable and billable, there's still a difference between those two.
Yeah.
You need to be at 10 to be billable. You need to be at 5 to be employable. And so the the yeah, it's still, if you have that background, you're often better in skills such as data modeling, which is a big gap when you work with people that typically only have 3 to 6 months of experience in IT. And experience, I mean training. Data modeling, training things like architecture. I'm an architect. I can get very, very upset if a bracket is in the wrong place, and that is not, yeah, that is. Just because if you don't have the sanity and of the base things, I know you're also not going to have paid attention to the larger architecture. And so those habits of understanding why things need to be in the correct place, how we communicate as a team, how we communicate through code, I find it easier to train people that have a bit of a background on such things than someone who's coming from nothing. And if you look at what the market is looking for, they're looking for people that can work in teams, that can have things that are maintainable, that can communicate. And that's where I wonder if we're not making it our own lives too difficult, and are keeping people that are almost ready for a job out of the market, and while over investing in things that will take a lot more money to get there.
You mean educating
Yeah, educating from 0 to 1.
from 0 to 1?
Mm.
Man, but that's a hard, like,
I
to
told
take
you it's a
away from.
controversial
Yeah, no,
statement.
which is, I mean, no, it's good. I mean, what do you do? Do you
Mm,
take
mm,
away from the one
mm,
to invest in the other? I mean, you started
mm,
with all the Uber drivers in Nairobi.
mm, mm.
I would agree. Now, it's a hard sell to say, well, we do less basic education and
No, that's
more.
not what I'm saying.
No, okay.
Um, but I'm saying that that should maybe be the responsibility of but if we can build up an economic base of those that are almost there, then I think there will be enough money to also do the other thing. I don't know if that
If
makes
we,
sense.
it, yeah, so if we grow the pie, I mean, if we grow the
Yeah,
economy,
if we grow the pie, then the government should have enough resources to also take care
we'll
of everyone
we'll
that is now
increase
falling out of the boat.
taxes.
Yeah.
We can increase teacher salaries, we can increase teacher training, and we can increase the baseline training. So it comes first, we bring money into the economy. That's what you're saying.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can go along with that.
And sometimes programs will fund, um, yeah, sometimes programs will basically fund, me- uh, let me rephrase this. Sometimes a program will fund, sorry, I think I know how to phrase it now. Sometimes programs will miss the close opportunities. Like the ones that are almost there, we ignore, and then we spend a lot more on things that will be a very long shot of making it.
Right. So you said you have a solution for finding technical co-founders and not
Yes.
necessarily only for startups, but technical people. Where do I find technical people? You have them for me?
First of all, I want to talk about your challenge. So how we are not an we are not a body shop. So we don't deliver. We don't. Sorry, I've lost my whole track with this. We've went down the rabbit hole again with controversial statements. So let me take a step back, and I.
I don't think it's controversial at all. I think
Mm,
it's super
mm,
interesting. It's like, what do you
mm,
invest in first? So there's this
mm,
whole argument about whether to invest in feeder roads, right?
mm,
Do you help farmers bring their products to market? Or
mm,
do you invest everything in the port of Mombasa? Do you put
mm,
all the money into the like get more berths, like just expand that one big
mm,
thing
mm,
to just have trade coming and going?
mm,
I mean, there's good. I mean, that to me, that's a parallel, right? Do you invest in
mm,
basic education more? Do you put everything into getting people from 0 to 1, or do you invest
mm,
in that last mile in order to help people actually bring money into the country that money will then and I'm always mindful to use the
mm,
word trickle down because some people
mm,
see that as a swear word, but
mm,
that will then go allow the government
mm,
and the education system to fund whatever you need to
mm,
expand that. I don't think that's controversial at all. I think that's a
mm,
valid point.
mm. Now, um, maybe to talk about the technical co-founder thing.
Yeah, yeah,
So what we find is that when we talk to startups and SMEs in Europe, they typically have a great idea for an innovation. This is something I see a gap in the market. Typically, when we talk about startup founders, we don't talk about the ones that are coming straight out of college, but typically it's the ones that have 10 to 15 years of experience and are seeing a gap in the market and then want to create a product there. What
yeah,
they typically lack is someone who can actually take that vision, understand that problem, and then build sort of the middle ground to realize their vision. How do I visualize how do I visualize your vision? Maybe sounds a bit weird, but what will your vision look like if you would turn that into a practical product?
implement,
And
yeah, build it.
I'll give the example of someone who came to me and they came to me with a problem of basically drawing solar panels. What do I mean? This was someone who had over 10 years of experience in the solar panel market as a salesperson. And what he realized was there is only one company in Belgium that has a monopoly on drawing solar panels. So the technical drawings, the electrical diagrams, the statutory drawings, all of that stuff. They are still using software from the early 2000s, which means you're working with file imports. You need a specific version of Windows to use it. And yeah, it's not yet connected to the internet, so you have to use transfer with email or USB sticks. And again, they're the monopoly, they're the only ones in the market. So he realized, I want to build a competitor to these guys. And so I know that whatever these guys have can be disrupted. I know there is room for a competitor. I know the money is there because I'm part of a solar company. I know how much we pay these guys and I know everyone is paying them. But how do I build this? So that's typically the type of problems we love because then
Yeah,
we can come in and try to understand, okay, first of all, what are the needs? What is the output that we need to generate? The output is these technical drawings of solar panels and the statutory documents. Okay, can we take that a bit wider? How does that operate within a business? So what are the brand promises you make to your customers from start to finish? How do you turn that into a customer experience? Because typically I don't want to just focus on the narrow problem. I want to focus on the startup story, right? How are you going into the market? How do we position ourselves in such a way that we can disrupt whatever was already there? And so we get to work and we create these presentations. We call that solution designing that very clearly explain this is what the platform will look like. This is how the process will go. And yeah, and this is what it's gonna need and cost to actually build. So we then take that step further. We say this is what we can build. Do you agree? Is it match your vision? We take input, we adjust it. If this is what we're gonna build, this is how much it would cost you if you do it with us. So that's sort of the architecture piece and the technical co-founder piece that is often lacking even in existing startups that have a technical co-founder because they jump in, they build, and they don't really think about long term, what is the roadmap we're heading to. So we take care of that piece. And we do that with both our people in Belgium, including myself. I still do some architecture work myself, but we're also training people in Kenya to be able to do that. And then we have a very clear proposal. And our brand promise is that we will then also execute that work at the price we set. So clear transparency, you don't end up in these endless loopholes of paying a developer every month and not seeing what's happening. This is what we're going to build. Here are my references to show you I've built stuff like this for many people before at quality. This is what it would cost you if I have to do it. So there's very clear transparency. And then it goes towards implementation. So now the client signs off on, okay, I want to do this, or the investment is too high, I don't want to do this. And it goes to our Kenyan production teams, where they get a project manager, they get a designer, they get a bunch of developers from senior to junior, depending on the level that is needed. And they get quality assurance. So they get a whole tech team from start to finish that will work and implement this product in different steps, again, in a very clear and accountable way. We call that a minimal viable product. How do I get from 0 to 1? We then do that on sprint basis. So we always work in sprints of 3 to 4 weeks, where at the end of 4 weeks, our clients get an actual product that they can actually use, start testing, show to their customers, get feedback, and then we iterate. And so we have focused ourselves, and that's where we are different from a traditional global business solutions company or a BPO, business processing outsourcing firm. We are mostly solution oriented. And so we take that, what are you trying to achieve? We give you clarity on what it will look like and what it will cost, and then we execute against that price, but we are output driven. So you pay us based on the output we produce. You don't pay us based on the time we spend. Of course, we calculate our fees based on the time we spend, but we take the risk on actually spending that time. You, who has a lot of business experience, has a lot of management and maybe company experience, but doesn't necessarily know what tech is, you don't have to worry, because we form that bridge between you. And that is how we generate these trade routes between Europe and Africa, right? Because Kenya is not really known as an outsourcing destination. So we feel like we have to go above and beyond to actually show that, one, we are capable of this. Two, we can even do it better than anything you can find in Europe, both in terms of technical quality as well as in product quality. And three, you can get it at a decent cost. So those are sort of the things we need to show very clearly. And we do that by the solution design, by this output-driven approach, rather than billing resources that you don't know who is on the other side of the table. You don't know what you're going to get, and it's a market you don't know. So you also can't, from the context itself, derive that this will be good. And so if you compare that to our initial model, where it was just, this is the startup, okay, I'm going to do this at this price. 5 years later, we still do the same thing. But then from there, we do build long-term relationships, because now I've taken risk for your company by executing at this scope and doing it at quality that you can't find anywhere else. Now let's do this thing together. I've proven I can do it. I want to be there for you on this whole startup journey. Can we make this startup journey happen together? And that's where I go back to that. We see ourselves as a technical co-founder for hire, because we focus on taking the pay away in the short term and forming long-term relationships out of that, where your success becomes our success.
Fascinating. So I have a bunch of different questions. First, I couldn't agree more with your sentiment that people who've worked in an industry for 10, 15 years and then strike it on their own are the most interesting people, and they need to be supported. That's, to me, just, I was in a startup accelerator recently, and there were some people having ideas about, problems they see out there in the world they want to fix, and that's fine, usually younger people. But then you'd have some older people who are saying, like, well, I worked in a hospital for 12 years, and we have this intricate problem of matching people with beds in this ecosystem of hospitals. And when the ambulance comes to the hospital, and they would explain this process, which would be for me like a deep dive into a world that I've never been in, or when I'm in it, I don't know what's happening, Try not to be in an ambulance too many times, but when I am, I hope they find a bed. And these people know exactly what the problem is and why it's not working and how it could be fixed. but they don't have the
Mm,
mechanics. They don't have the toolbox for it, right? They don't have the
mm,
mechanics who could build it for them. So I find that interesting that you guys do that
mm,
because that would be my selection process for which startups, because most startups fail, of course, and which startups to go with.
mm.
The ones that are,
Ours, ours
yeah,
typically don't. Yeah.
yours typically don't. So do you also turn startups down in terms of like your idea is you're probably not going to be able to
Mm.
pay me because you're I
No, but
so
it's about a fair process. So we do charge for the solution design, so that you have very clear insights in what it will cost, and then it's up to you to decide whether this is an investment you want to go through or not. So I've never turned down anyone. I do have, as you mentioned, the ideal customer profile and the people and that ideal customer profile is not because, okay, these people have experience, I know they can afford it. It's really about in our own past experience, these have been very beautiful partnerships. We have exited two startups so far, and these are the type of dynamics that backgrounds they typically have. So we know that if we encounter people like this, it will be a good match. But we have a clear process, and anyone who wants to participate in that process is welcome, and we will be happy to take on. But
so one question I have though in terms of you said none of your startups that you've supported have failed.
no, no,
That's a
that's an exaggerated.
I mean,
But
that would be phenomenal because startups don't
mhm,
only fail because they don't have the technical support. A lot
mhm,
of times they fail because the idea was shit. Like it was just
mhm,
it wasn't, they needed to pivot and it just wasn't the thing that the market wanted, right? So that's most of the
mhm,
time the idea
mhm.
didn't quite work. That's why if those two sentences, we don't turn people down and they've never failed. They didn't fit with me.
No, that's a bit of an exaggeration. We do have some of the startups that are no longer around. Um, but you have different journeys, right? And not every startup needs to be an hyperscaler. And I think that's also something that I've never understood. I've been in the sector for quite a bit, quite a long time. And you also see that some of these narratives they change whenever the VCs have money or they don't have money. Right now they don't have money, so we all talk about zebras and we all talk about cash flow and we all talk about sustainable business models. And then when you were 2 or 3 years ago and all of the VCs wanted to get rid of their money, everyone was talking about everything has to be a hyperscaler or it's not worth our time. All of those companies, unfortunately, many of them are dead. And so what I
But
do
that was part
always
of the plan,
feel,
right?
uh,
That was part
what
of
do
the
you mean?
plan, right? You you
I
you
don't.
you fund 20 of them and you see if
Mhm.
what like the VCs fund 20 of them to in the hopes that one will make up the money you wasted on the other 19, right?
Yeah, I wonder how that's going for them. I'm not an expert, but um, so to me, I've always worked with people that are more building stable businesses, and to me, that's a success story. You don't have to be a hyperscaler. I do have seen the hyperscale journey, and I'm right now in even two stories that are scaling as we speak. And so I've done that a few times. And that's quite exciting, but not everyone needs to be a hyperscaler. Sometimes you can even find that with building the correct technology and then pricing it well, you don't need that many customers to build a very good sustainable business that has growth, that is contributing to the economy, and that is providing value to people. So I prefer to work with holistic and sustainable businesses in that sense, and that starts from your leaders. Um, but I do have the advantage that I've only sold ever through my network. So I've never done marketing, I've never done sales. And if you have a network of people that are working and thinking in that direction, you tend to end up with clients that work and think in that direction. So that's also maybe why I say we never turn anyone down if it fits our business model and if we can do it, because sometimes you also just have so many projects. Um, and yeah, it's probably also because of the way I sell.
Yeah. How many people do you guys have?
We're a bit over 20, but yeah, what we do not want to do is take the next step. And that's why what I've said now is also going to be changed soon because we're investing a lot in marketing strategy, sales networks. And so we're probably going to go onto the market now beyond my own network.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that connection between training people, how much in-house training are you personally involved in? Is that like if you look at a pie chart of your time,
Mm.
how much are you helping people? I guess working on projects together with people. I always have
Um,
this picture of Quentin Tarantino learning how to make movies by making his first movie, which he said was very bad,
mhm,
while he worked in a video store. So
mhm,
actually helping people on the job get better.
mhm.
Uh, can you
So a lot
differentiate
of
that
it
from
is,
training?
yeah, I do, I would say I do three things. The first one is the lectures. So I still do some lectures on topics such as cloud architecture, AI, and I try to stay ahead of the curve with such topics. So we have our own in-house open source infrastructure for a lot of projects that we've developed from the ground up to basically make sure that we can scale our software. We're always on the cutting edge of these things, so we try to work serverless most of the time. Um, and then there's my lectures on basic concepts, the history, and I try to do these things a bit like a university professor would do them. So if I talk about serverless, I start from on-premise computers to virtual machines to Docker containers, Kubernetes cluster, and now serverless, which is just a huge cluster that we can all rent. And so I find those fundamentals are important, and it's often what's lacking in a lot of programs where we focus on, let's say, again, if you look at the boot camps, we're trying to train you for React. I'm not going to teach you theory of computation. I'm just going to teach you React. But then the issue is the industry moves so fast that if you don't have these fundamentals, there's no way you can keep up for long. And so you need to teach people fundamentals uh, on infrastructure, sometimes on networking, sometimes on theory of computation. I've done one once. AI, I've done once, but not the surface level stuff. What is a search algorithm? Some of these things I'm also not an expert in, like machine learning. I know how it works, but I'm not a machine learning expert. So I try to keep it to what I know, which is even more basic than machine learning, but search algorithms or statistics. Sometimes mathematics. I think mathematics is also something that is often overlooked. I had a developer recently that was um, that needed to solve a problem with probability because she was creating simulations. And so I tell her create a ring, and based on the ring, when it matches zero, that's your because it actually turned into a whole lecture about mathematical rings and modulo and what all of those things are. But I find it important that when someone doesn't understand what I'm saying, after we are done, they do, because else you keep having these gaps and you keep having these differences in language you're speaking, in knowledge you have. So I would say that you have my lectures, then you have the day-to-day, which is I review a task, we think about a problem. If you don't understand what I'm saying, I'm going to explain it to you right in there and then. And then you still have I still do a bit of code reviews. So I still, for core algorithms, do the code reviews myself. Not scalable, but I already have another architect. I'm getting a few more that I'm training. But it's important that at least the core algorithms, we deliver the quality that we promise, and that I still ensure myself. Now, with code reviews, is actually an amazing tool to teach. But it's important that you go back to that you explain to people why something is wrong. So you don't just say this bracket should not be here, it should be there. You make a whole story about if everyone starts creating their own way in which of writing these files, no one can read what's going on anymore. If you put a structure of how your functions are defined, how your classes are defined, how everything should be, then for me reviewing, I can focus on what I should actually be focusing on, which is your algorithm, and I don't get distracted trying to figure out where things are. So that explanation is very important if you're telling someone this is good or this is bad. We have a structure in the company to sort of evolve towards a continuous learning algorithm that I stole from healthcare. I used to do some development work in my education days. I've sort of started phasing that out. Still have a few final projects, but I no longer do development these days. And I was tasked with basically 75 structures in health in Congo, Kinshasa, using education to strengthen the healthcare system around référence contre référence. What is référence contre référence? It's basically if we don't want people to just walk into the ICU and clog up the ICU with a headache or with something that any doctor can treat. Instead, we want them to go to the lowest level facility. If the lowest facility level can't handle it, they go to the provincial hospital, they go to the national hospital, so that there's a chain of um, yeah, there's a chain of command basically, and of complexity, because you
Yeah.
have your more advanced doctors at the highest level. And so what you find in such a setting is often that chain is broken. And it's broken because there's no communication. You come at the lowest level, they say they can't help you because you have this symptom. They send you to the next one, and they don't hear about you anymore. The next one is complaining because they're like, these are things that you can handle at that level. Why am I getting these people? But they don't communicate that back to the lower level. And so the system is cut, meaning you never have, the system can't heal itself, and the system can't learn from its own structure. And so what's very important is when someone refers you a case, let's say I have my level 2 developers reviewing a level 1 and they're sending it to an engineer. I need my engineers to come back with the solution to that level 1, and not to, okay, I've solved it. I've solved it is not a proper solution. I want them to go and explain to everyone, this is why this is why you were having that issue, and this is how you solve it going forward. Because
Right.
that way you create a continuous learning organism. And so
Yeah.
by the time something gets to me for code reviews that I don't pick up myself, it's often a complex problem. And then with my, this is now close to 15 years of experience, I can probably solve it. But I still go back to whoever had the initial issue to make sure that the whole chain remains healed. And that way you can
Right.
scale it. The opposite problem also happens. You find that someone at the lowest level has something they cannot handle. In our case in Congo, we had a lot of issues with maternity, where maternity women that were about to have birth, maybe they needed a cesarean, they were not being transferred to the next level way too late, which resulted into very bad situations. So also there, people need to have constant reflection. Should I have referred this or not? When do I decide to take care of a problem myself? How do I refer as fast as possible without clogging up the bigger system? Those are things that you constantly need to monitor, and that needs a lot of coaching.
Right. That's what I was thinking about.
Mm,
I would go straight to the ICU because
mm,
I don't want a lower level person working on
mm,
me. That's,
mm,
I mean, my personal interest is to get the best
mm,
expert, regardless of how
mm,
small my problem is, right?
mhm.
I care about
Then,
myself more than about the system at this moment, right? So that's why people
mm,
line up at the
mm,
hospital and they don't want to go to the
mhm,
local clinic,
mhm,
lest you have someone there who is maybe overconfident at your
mm,
expense.
mm. Yeah, in that case, they did have an extra sort of carrot behind the stick, carrot behind the door, because they did also give, basically, they would fund part of your doctor costs if you follow the procedure properly. So that was one of the
Okay.
things when we strengthened that system. We did have a pot of money to help with that as well, so that people learn that this is the correct way of doing
If you're
of
modest and send people
mm,
on, or if fewer people die on your watch,
mm,
you get you get a bonus,
mm, mm.
right?
I don't know
So
how that worked, but it was for the people themselves. If you follow
yeah,
the chain of command, then you get part of your healthcare costs covered by the state.
yeah. So let me, you just use that as an example, right? So
Mm,
this organizational knowledge within an organization, this
mm,
institutional knowledge, I find it so hard to transfer knowledge, right? To
mm,
have, when you're working with a group of people, to actually have that knowledge in-house, not in only
mm,
in individuals,
mm,
and have knowledge between people. The older I get, the more respect I have for
mm,
large organizations that get anything done.
mm,
Um, so where I'm going with this is, how do you scale? Now you have what,
mm,
22 people,
mm,
how do you become, 22,000 people in terms of
mm,
what you actually need to do if you're looking at the demographics of Europe and the demographics of
mm,
Kenya or sub-Saharan Africa?
mm,
You need to have this concept that apparently works for you with your 20
mm,
people. How
mm.
do you scale that up? I mean, how do you manage, what if you get hit by a bus? Like, how does
Mm.
this thing grow
That is,
and sustain itself? Yeah. I hope you don't get hit by a bus, by the way.
mm. No, I'll watch out. Thanks. But
Traffic is tricky in Nairobi, but
uh, but it's actually what keeps us awake now at night. It has to be very bad for me to lose my sleep after 10 years in the business, but it's what we focus most of our attention on. Because indeed, I am still, this is something you have to be honest about, I'm still a bottleneck in the organization, but we are working now very hard to relieve that bottleneck. And there are different ways in which I'm thinking about that. And I don't have an answer yet. There are things I've tried in the past that have failed, which was to mostly look at, for example, getting people on top of operations or those type of things. It just caused a lot more of a mess than it should have. But that's part of scaling. You need to experiment, try out. If it doesn't work, you need to take a step back and try something else. And so right now we can go in one of two directions. Either we are going to get someone who can really lead hard on the commercial side, which I still also take heavy part on, or we're gonna just find someone who can do what I do in terms of architecture and get someone very technical, because I know how to identify very technical people and move all the projects there. And so those are different experiments that we're going to run over the next 2 years, and we'll see what sticks. But my core responsibility is to just make sure that our customers are treated with the quality that they deserve.
yeah.
And so in that process, it's always going to be done with that in mind.
So
Now, when it comes to the scaling up, I think I didn't answer that part of your question. I don't have the ambition to go beyond more than 100 or something employees, because I'm in the startup and SME space. We also do a lot for SMEs. I haven't really talked about how the needs are different there and stuff, but that maybe for our next podcast. But I'm mostly focused on the startup and SME sector, and I'm mostly focused on solutioning and output. And so I don't see how also in an age of AI, I would need more than 100, 200, let's say even 500 people to deliver the maximum value that we can as an organization. It doesn't solve the need that the continent has, which is in Kenya alone, we have 1 million people turning 18 every year. It's our biggest blessing. It's our biggest problem because we need to find them jobs.
it's about 80,000 of them. So it's
Mm.
about 8% of that 1 million that find jobs in the formal economy, right? That's every year, every year. It's like that huge traffic jam that's coming onto the labor market, and it's getting bigger, where
But if you
8%
can
are finding.
promote the SME sector, and then you find other people that can also maybe need 200 people or 100 people, and then they spin out and they also do need 100 people or 200 people, I think
So
you
who
can
are
have a
you?
chain effect like that.
Okay, so who do you mean by SME? So I was confused there for a second. So
Mm.
you support European startups with their
Mhm.
ideas,
Uh,
and then you flipped over just talking about SMEs. Now there's two
mhm.
types of SMEs: the European SMEs, which are actually quite large, up to a
Mhm.
thousand people, and then there is what we call in Kenya the Jua Kali, like under the sun,
Yeah,
which is so. What? Who are you
a lot
supporting with
of. I think we need more of those European type of SMEs on the continent. That's actually what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so you need a middle class in Africa,
Mm.
sure. Yeah, but
Mm.
who are you supporting? You're supporting Kenyan SMEs, or you're supporting European SMEs? You're supporting a German bakery, or
Now with SMEs, I do both. So with SMEs, I mostly do ERP and process type of work, which is very similar to solutioning for startups, but you do it within an existing context. That's why ERP is almost always the answer. Um,
what does
Unless if they want
ERP
to
stand for?
create
I looked that up before because you mentioned it to me last time, and I
mm,
didn't want to look stupid. But
an
now, what is
enterprise
ERP?
resource planning software. So
Enterprise Resource Planning Software. What does that mean?
the SAPs, the Microsoft Dynamics, it's basically a system to manage all of your business processes from sales to
Okay,
operations
okay.
to production, manufacturing, any of those that you want to. And so we started doing that about a year ago on the African continent, with an ERP partner that we've chosen and that we specialized in, which is called Odoo, because we like the product offering they have for the market here. They have Africa-based pricing, which the other ones don't, and I like also how that system works. But generally, we find that when we work with SMEs, both in Europe, because I have Odoo clients in Europe, I have Odoo clients here in Kenya. Um, with an ERP, they're well helped, and then you start plugging in other things into that sort of skeleton of a system that takes them from working with paper, or if they're good with Excel, to working with structured systems and online processes that can be verified, audited, and basically take the next step.
Now, you mentioned you're not going to use that many people with AI coming
Mm-hmm.
up. So you're seeing a one-to-one replacement there. So using, well, let's back up. Let's back up.
I
You've,
think we're going into different directions all at
yeah,
once
yeah,
now.
but let's, no, 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 it's good. Let's
Mm.
back. So you recently told me you were skeptical of code assistant tools. Like, was it you
Mm.
using Cursor recently or Windsurf?
Mhm. Mhm.
Which
No,
one did you?
I'm a reformed skeptic, is what I think
y-
I said.
Yeah,
I
you were
used to be
initially skeptical.
skeptical,
Yeah,
and then
and
I
then
saw the light.
recently, so you've converted. So
Yeah.
what tool do you use? Windsurf or?
I use a bunch of tools, Cursor. I used to use Windsurf, now I've gone to Cursor, which is a bit more technical. If I want to do prototyping, I use Figma, Make, or Lovable, which are really great because you just type how you see it, and they do product flows. The code is, yeah, I don't want to say that on a podcast, but it's bad. Yeah, I wanted to say shit, but I don't know how creatively liberal
Can't
I
say
can
that. You
be.
can't say that here. This is
Yeah, that's what I thought. So I take that back. Now, so Lovable and Figma Make are really great for this rapid prototypes where you don't need the code behind it, but you need to prove a concept to the customer of does this flow work? Do more think in this direction? And so that sort of replaces a good part of design, because a good part of design is often if you can figure out the user experience, then that it is pixel perfect and stuff can come in later phases. But in most MVPs, it's not important unless you go to marketing and those type of things. It just needs to be neat, well done, clean, but it doesn't need to be having sparkles and those type of things yeah, that are really going towards design. And so that is what I use Figma Make Lovable for. Cursor and Windflow I use, and Windsurf I use for coding itself. Recently, I also started agentic coding, which is also very fun, where you just prompt, monitor, review the code, make the changes, lock it in, prompt again. Um, what I've seen, and this is where I reformed, when I was talking about this thing a year ago, these tools were nowhere near anything impressive. And if you've been in the sector for a few years, these low-code tools and where you have Bubble, you have some of these type of things, they've been around for forever, but they can't really help you much on an enterprise or on a professional level beyond prototyping. And so back a year ago, these AI tools didn't really make it out of that realm yet. And so I was very skeptical. I didn't see software developers really being replaced by these type of tools until 2, 3 months ago when I tried them again, and I was just blown away from my chair on how fast they actually got what I wanted, and some of the things they even did better than a lot of juniors I worked with before I trained them. So you find that it's just been a leapfrog that these tools have made. I don't know where it's going, but I'm sure it's not the end yet. And
Yeah,
for us, it was a real wake-up call. I had the crisis meeting with the whole team the next week, showed them what the thing can do, and said, guys, I need everyone to wake up because this thing is coming for our job. It is really as simple as that. And
yeah.
it's not coming for our job necessarily, but it's coming for part of it. A lot of the expertise and time that we used to spend on projects was you have an idea, that idea is converted into a product, and now you're making the product. That making of the product is the one that's under the biggest threat of being accelerated or for some parts replaced by AI. The real solutioning, I don't see that being under threat, at least not with anything I've seen so far.
Right. I had Sam Moosey on here last week, and he told me that developers are mercenaries. They usually don't have their own ideas.
Mhm.
There's idea people out there, and then there's developers. There's the technical people who will just implement whatever it is you're doing.
Mhm.
So that part, how much of the pie chart of your work is that actual implementation part that's going to get done by these tools? Or let me ask the other way around. If, under Karpathy says the new coding language is going to be English
Mhm.
or whatever language, pick your choice. It's going to be English
Mhm.
first, and then maybe next French, then German, and then goes down the list, and soon it's
Mhm.
Swahili. Um, if that is the case, come along with me on that journey.
Mhm.
What is there to be done for your ilk, your type? What do you guys do?
Mhm.
What is the value
Mhm.
you guys add other than writing in code? And I know that's a provocative question, but how do you
Mhm.
guys weather that storm, or is it actually helpful for you if some illiterate like myself can come in and just, write in English what I want Lovable to do, and Lovable actually is
Mhm.
as good as
Mhm.
you say in a year?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, you don't know what's going to come in a year or two. Um, but what you often find, and this is what I think why I'm not too afraid for a good part of our work. Yeah, I'm also not really afraid for the other part because we can now do it faster with these tools. But we have always been a solutioning and an output-driven company. So we don't just give you people that can code, mercenary style, where you just say do this and they do it. We are partners of the businesses we work with, and we try to think about how do you do your operations and where can technology help. And so I think the big future of the sector will be people who can sit with customers, understand their business processes, understand their customers, and then propose what solutions will be a good fit for whatever challenge they might have or will be a strategic advantage. And it's a bit similar to the ERP sector, enterprise resource planning sector I talked about earlier. That sector has been around for when was SAP founded? It's a German company, yeah, one of the German giants. But
Yeah,
it's at least, is it the 80s? Is it the 90s? I'm not sure.
it's
It's
been
been
around.
around forever. And it's still a huge sector
It's
because the sector is not,
Europe's biggest tech cluster is in Waldorf,
yeah.
which is a
Mm,
tiny, tiny town. And it's just
mhm,
because that one company is headquartered there. So it's kind of
mhm,
funny.
mhm,
Like, anyway,
mhm.
sorry, go ahead. That's
Yeah.
just,
But it's what I mean. There's a huge value that hangs around this SAP software. Even when I was in college, so my first degree, we had a specialization which was literally SAP. So you could study at college to become an SAP consultant. That's how much the market needs these guys. And these guys, they don't do hardcore coding. And I don't want to insult them also, but it's not the same type of hardcore coding as you would do when you're typing a bash script or you're typing yeah, you're doing stuff in assembly or whatever we used to do in back in the old days, where we're still typing, yeah, on postcards or stuff like that. It's not advanced engineering, but they're generating a huge amount of business value because they can take a business process, understand what needs to happen, and then select the correct technology within the SAP framework or outside of it that solves that client's needs and that brings that business forward. Also with inclusive of training, change management, and those type of things. So you have a huge sector that has been around for the ERP sectors. I think the long-term future of software development will be something very similar, where you have an idea that you want to, again, you're 10, 15 years in business, you have identified this idea that would be a perfect SaaS platform. The building of the SaaS platform, yes, a part of it will be commoditized. I think I'm on the convinced side now. But the translation of your vision into a product, that is something humans still will need to do. And so I see those sectors sort of come together in that sense. And I draw a lot of parallel between the ERP sector and the custom code sector, in which I'm still most involved. And so I'm not much under threat because I'm already in the business of figuring out these solutions and then selecting the correct code language, whether that's a prompt, whether it's a framework, whether that's whatever, to solve your needs in the most efficient way possible, while generating economic value for you. And in doing so, I generate economic value for my company.
so again, I mean, what should young people be learning then? What are you looking for? What are you teaching? So you're big on education, right? So
Mhm.
what Should they be learning the nuts and bolts of coding if we go along that trajectory? If Kaparthi is right, that in a year from now, maybe English is the coding language. So should they just be, what would we be teaching them? What's
What
the technical
I,
skill?
yeah, it's mostly soft skills. I think that will be the future. Understanding people, um, communicating well, critical thinking, and then of course creativity. Yeah? Doing
Yeah, but
something
we
no one else
started
has
the,
done before.
no, that's you. I'm not going to let you go on that because we
Ah,
started the conversation. We started the
shit.
conversation on the technical co-founder. Now, if you're telling me you're
Mhm.
going to be my technical co-founder because you got great soft skills, then
Mhm.
what's technical about that?
No, but I mean, the how I written it into our internal documentation because we're really working very hard on this, understanding the AI sector ourselves, understanding what's happening, and then being on the forefront of that. Is I see two skill sets. I call it the high code, um, which is really algorithmic thinking, but the use cases for that will become more limited as what they are today. It will also mostly be backend work, writing stuff that machines talk to each other and then optimizing that because efficiency is not always the best. Um,
So we're
and so you
becoming
will
the
still
machine's
have
assistants?
no, no, no. So you have the ones that are still coding in the traditional sense, but they are going to be working on much more complex problems than they are working on today. Then the other hand is those that are going towards product and becoming. Um, that's where the soft skills become very important. Understanding the client and then proposing the correct solution through working with these AI machines. And so the prompting is an important skill, but it is creativity. And that is where I am going to bring that word back again. Because I think the creative sector is, I think there's going to be sort of an inflection point where technology goes more towards design and design goes more toward technology. And they'll meet somewhere in the middle. Because I want to understand the problem and then I want to make an experience out of the solution. Those are the skills that people should have. How to train for that is really with soft skill training and understanding people and then having that creativity to make an experience out of whatever it is these things can do for other people.
So there are
It's too
two.
vague,
No, no,
still
that's
too
good.
vague.
That's good. I'm still, but I'm still coming. So there are two ways of that international connection. I think there's global
Mm,
products, like the
mhm,
stuff that's being built in Silicon Valley, and applying that to the local context in Nairobi, in the rural
mhm,
areas in Kenya. And I think that's great. You can have smart
mhm,
people, local people who understand the local context, how it needs to change in order to
mhm,
take that global product and bring it to the local context in a tailored way, right?
mhm,
Then there's the other way around where you have global business services. You have companies outsourcing, getting people from a place like Kenya,
mhm,
mainly because of cost, right? They're cost
mhm,
competitive,
mhm,
um, to help you with something that you actually know better, you as the client, right? So if I'm hiring you to do something for me here in Germany,
mhm,
because you guys are more cost competitive than the company that I could hire down the road,
mhm,
I am foregoing that the company down the road would actually have more local knowledge per definition because they are local, right?
mhm,
Because you are more cost competitive, right? So this is
mhm.
why I'm interested in digital services exports from Africa to the world in order to kind of undercut on price the way that, the way the Chinese did it with
But
manufacturing.
you're assuming that there is a German company that has enough people to actually deliver on the demand that the market is generating, which is often not the case.
Right,
So price
right.
competitiveness is not a thing I play with. I tell that to all of our customers. We are more expensive than Portugal. We are more expensive than Eastern Europe because we try to focus on two things. One is customer closeness. It's not because I'm in Kenya that I can't understand your business and who your clients are, how you're very running, what keeps you up at night, and then propose solutions for that. It is just means I maybe need to do a bit more effort to understand that. But once I do, I will be able to give you the same solutions or better than anyone else at that level can. And so that customer closeness for us is very important. The second one is innovation. We want to be constantly this bridge between what is happening out there and what our customers need. It's a bit similar to the AI discussion. What will people need? They will need people. They will need people that can translate business problems and find the. It's maybe to go back to education, the correct solution. So the correct solution for the correct problem with the correct technology. That's sort of the skill that our customers are looking for, and that's technology is a variable. Technology keeps moving, new things keep happening. See what happened with large language models. But then it's my job as your partner, technical partner, to identify these things for you and then say, maybe this could be an interesting problem for your solution. Maybe, this could be an interesting solution for your problem, not the other way around. And I think so that the market is too small. It's also been the whole premise of Elewa and Atalanta in the beginning. You have 1 million people turning 18 here. We need to give them jobs. We need to give them high-value jobs. If you create a high-value job, you create 5 more jobs further down the chain. That is just how it works. In Europe, we can't find any people anymore. If we find a developer, they're going to charge me 20,000 euros a month. And that's the type of prices that we're talking about at the senior level, between 12 to 20, sometimes even higher. And my budget will be gone before I even have anything. And it's just how we want to be able to give the same value to you as that guy charging you 12,000 to 20,000 euros. It's going to be cheaper because we still have this context. But your biggest problem is finding us. Your biggest problem is not the price. And I think that is a very important differentiator, how we position ourselves compared to how most of BPO and GBS looks at itself.
So let me, in my own words now, let me repeat what I think you just said.
Mm-hmm.
You don't differentiate yourself on price. You're more of a, you're at a very high level.
Mm-hmm.
But you are also a little bit cheaper than a German company. If I were, yeah. So,
yes. But people will not come to me for price. That is what I'm trying to say.
But if my comparison is either a German company or you, it would probably be on price still, right? Like it's a one factor in the, maybe not as big as if I went to
maybe it's
another
because
place.
we look at it. Maybe it's because we look at it differently. I mostly work for startups, and I think that is a very important differentiator. Let's look at the Belgian market. For me, an MVP will cost you anything between 20 to 100,000 euros. Significant investment, but not out of reach for many people, especially if they have 10 to 15 years of experience. Often with enough documentation and information, you can even do a grant proposal and get some of that cost funded by the state because you're doing something innovative that the market needs. So accessible pricing, right? Accessible pricing is not cheap pricing. If you would compare me to whoever is going after the corporates, then I'm probably in the cheap category, but I'm not going after those. I work for startups. Now, go to any of my competition in Belgium that do the same thing, that do solution design, that do agency model at fixed price, and then do long-term partnerships. That 20 to 100,000 will be 150 to 300 to 500,000 for the same thing. Okay. If you, with your many years of experience, Elvis, and the guy you are, I'm sure you have a million ideas in your head. Come to one of these companies and you say, I want to create a startup, and they flag you with 300,000 euros. Maybe for you it's possible, but for most people it won't be possible. And the idea dies there. So that startup will never be created because it will just be such a hassle to collect the money to pay these guys. And startup is that I don't want to take that leap. For us, we created our own category. Yes, we can do that thing that these guys do at 300,000, at 20 to 100. But then we serve people that would otherwise not be able to access those services anyway. And so we're not a price company. We're an innovation and customer closeness company that operate in their own niche. Maybe with that last jump, I lost you again. but that's at
Yeah,
least how I
because you
see
just
myself.
said because in the second
Mm,
last sentence you said
mm,
you're 10 times cheaper. And in the
mm.
last sentence you said you're not a price company.
No, I unlock a new category because of the ability to work on price. I think that is what I'm trying to say. And if
Yeah.
you would be a price company, you would be looking at, okay, these guys are doing
Oh, you're
projects for the
undercutting an
government
existing market.
at
Okay.
300,000. I'm going to do them at 100.
You're
That's a
opening up.
price play.
Yeah. No, this makes sense to me. I mean, I
Mhm.
think it's a terminology, right? So
Yeah.
you are allowing people to buy something that it's like Henry Ford with cars, right? You're
Mm,
allowing people to buy cars who hitherto weren't able to buy cars, who didn't even think they could buy cars.
mm,
So you're allowing startups to get your services, your products
mm. I
that
wouldn't call myself Henry Ford, but the concept is correct.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So
So
you
that's
said
sort
you
of
don't.
why I don't like the whole price discussion, because I think it makes sense if you're talking about the BPO industry and the GBS industry. If you're talking about us, we really don't see ourselves as. I'm not saying we're expensive. Also, we are accessible, but we want to offer you great value at a good price. We don't want to offer you some value at a cheap price.
So if I have here in a region in West Germany, I've got a bunch of SMEs, small, mid-sized companies, 25 people to a
Mm,
thousand people, say 200 people.
mhm,
Um, they've heard about AI, it's coming in. They are wondering if they should automate some processes. They think they
mm,
probably should because you can save cost or move into adjacent markets with it.
mm.
Um, but would that be your
That
clientele?
would
Could I bring them? Could I tell them, hey, listen, I got Jente down there in Kenya. Let's get on a call. Let's talk to them. Let's see what those guys can do.
that would be
Is,
perfect. Yeah, I love
yeah,
those type of companies.
yeah. I mean, and we got tons of them. We're still talking about what are we talking about? The digital transformation. I hope there's no analog companies out there anymore, but we're still
Mm,
talking about the digital transformation. Now
mm,
we need to start talking about the AI transformation, right? Like how do we kind of bring AI agents
mm.
into our industry? Um,
We're still
so
talking about
opening up,
21st century education. We are 25 years into the 21st century, so it's a common problem.
I've just heard somebody say middle of July. So July,
Mm,
actually, we are in the second half of the first half of the century.
mm.
So we're into we've got Q1 of the 21st
Mm,
century is
mm,
is officially done with as of last week.
mm, mhm,
Yeah, so we're in the future now. We're in the sci-fi era.
mm.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah. So you still said that I mean, you don't want to grow larger than 100 people, but this is maybe something we have to take up next time. Of course, I'm
Mm,
interested in seeing what's scalable.
mm.
Maybe not with you
Wow.
personally, but your model.
Mm,
I mean, we've got a
mhm,
lot of small and mid-sized companies. If one thing Germany is famous for, it's well, bureaucracy, tax law,
mm,
and the Mittelstand, mid-sized
mm,
SMEs that are actually not that
mhm,
small, that are actually doing well.
mhm,
Family businesses on the side of the highway that are
mhm,
doing things that, apparently other people in the world can't do. Otherwise, they'd be out of business. But they're
mhm,
still finding ways in industry to build some part for the engine that only they can build and helping them kind of streamline their admin processes and helping them, get up to date with technology, with software. I
mhm,
think there's a I get a cost competitive
mhm.
angle here um, to help them do this.
No, I think we. It's even why we came to visit you in Berlin, Elvis. I think we're very interested in meeting German companies, any company basically that is interested in taking a next step and doesn't really know how to do it. We believe we can really create value for those type of companies, and it's what we love to do. And so for me, I love creating value. I love realizing things together. So if these are companies that are looking for a next step, but they don't have really someone who can brainstorm it out with them, who can analyze what is happening, and then based on that sort of show them this is what is happening with AI, this is what is happening broader in the industry, could be ERP systems, could be high tech, whatever, I don't know. I'm interested in a lot of stuff, and so are my people. Those are the type of conversations I love to have. And then sometimes it might realize something, sometimes it might not. But at least we had a fun discussion like what we're having now.
Yeah.
Something always comes out of it.
Jente, thanks for doing this.
Thanks a lot, Elvis, as well, for having me. And I always love having a conversation with you.
Yeah, me too.